So in our last video, we discussed the math of how shelling works. But how the different shell levels and shell types work is only part of the equation. Each of the different shelling types does have different combos they are optimal at using, giving them different play styles.
What's your style?
So let's talk about the different play styles of Gunlance and how they mathematically compare to one another. There are 4 different styles of Gunlance, one for each shelling type, so normal full burst, wide poke shell, and long charge shells. And then there is also Swinglance, the non-shelling style. Let's talk about normal shelling first. So normal shells have the most shells per clip at 5 per clip and 6 with capacity boost. However, as you can see in this chart, they have the lowest base damage out of every single shelling type. Furthermore, their bonus for charge shells is only 1.6. And this is 1.6 the base amount, so even though wide shelling has a 1.4 multiplier because it has a higher base damage, it ends up doing more damage on charged shells. So for normal shelling, it's the worst, and for charged shelling, it's the worst, so why use normal? You use normal because it's the best in the game at the full burst combo desu. The full burst combo is upswing into slam into full burst into wide sweep into quick reload into slam into full burst, etc, etc. This full burst unloads every single shell in your clip at the same time. With capacity boost, normal shelling has twice the shells per clip as wide and 50% more than long. On top of that, it has a 10% damage multiplier on full burst shell explosions. This does lead to it having the highest shelling damage on its full burst attack. Not by a huge margin, but normal gunlances also have the benefit that the actual meta normal gunlances have very high EFR on their sets, and the motion value per second of the full burst combo is a lot, at least relevant to the other Gunlance combos. So at which breakpoints does the DPS of the normal full burst combo beat the other types? Well, here we have a chart of every single possible combo you use with the different Gunlances, the EFR for their respective builds, and then the total DPS they do depending on the hit zone value of the monster part you hit. And yes, this accounts for weakness exploit, all artillery skills, capacity boost, feline bombardier, and focus 3 on long Gunlance. It's a lot of information, but let's break it down. So first off, Swinglance is the only option that actually competes for highest DPS out of all the Gunlance styles with normal. The shelling in your combo compared to Swinglance makes it better at lower hit zone value monsters. In fact, the breakpoint for that is at 55 hit zone value. Above that is the breakpoint at which Swinglance will start beating you for DPS because it overcomes the difference in lack of shelling damage. This is assuming that both have their highest sharpness, and that is an issue with normal Gunlance, but we'll discuss that more later. The other competitor is going to be wide shelling. Basically, the breakpoint at which full busto beats every possible wide shelling combo is at 55 hit zone value. At this point, looping the full busto combo will deal more damage than any possible combination of attacks that the wide shells can use. Wide shelling is extremely versatile and has a lot of different combos, and we'll discuss the intricacies of those a bit more when we talk about wide shelling. But this DPS is only assuming you're doing the loop part of the combo, in other words, you're skipping the upswing by doing quick reload loops. Adding in that upswing does significantly lower your DPS with full bursto. In fact, that combo including upswing loses to wide at every single possible hit zone value. So in other words, the more you can spam the loop without having to stop, the more DPS you do. But the moment that you have to block or hop or stop your combo in any way, your DPS goes down by a bit. This makes it kind of impractical to use unless you use Rocksteady Mantle and the health augments, or arguably in multiplayer depending on how lucky you are with monster aggro. Alright, next up we have wide shelling. Wide shells deal the most damage per shell for uncharged shells, as well as wyvern fires and worm stakes. They also have fatter shells, hence wide, but that doesn't really make that much of a difference. They do have the weakest full burst combo, but that's not really a problem because they get to use a whole bunch of different combos. All of these generally involve weaving different pokes and uncharged shells into each other. Generally, this combo is going to be poke shell, poke shell, poke shell, quick reload. This gives you the most balanced damage in terms of the fixed damage and your EFR based raw damage. This is generally your bread and butter and will be best in most situations. There are some combos that'll beat it depending on hit zone value of the monster, but we'll discuss those when we discuss those combos. The next combo you can do is going to be 3 pokes plus a shell done 3 times and then a quick reload. And this is more raw focused, so better for squishy monsters. The breakpoint at which this is better is technically at 55 hit zone value. but this is only for the first 2 rotations where you don't have to reload. If you account for all 9 of the pokes or 3 of the shells plus the quick reload mixed in there, it only beats it when you hit 80 hit zone value or higher. Of course, realistically, you don't get to do the full combo and just reload every time. Sometimes you reload in between combos or chasing or things like that, so it has its uses. Or you can even do shell, poke, shell, shell, quick reloads, repeats. You do have to weave a poke into this combo. If you try the shell 3 times in a row, that 3rd shell instead becomes a weird mistake. But this 3 shells and 1 poke combo is going to be the highest shelling damage per second you can possibly do. Yes, even more than just purely spamming charged shells on long Gunlance. Plus you get a poke weaved in between, so that's even more bonus damage on top of that. But more on that when we talk about long Gunlance. Now this 3 shelling 1 poke combo does out DPS a 3 poke 3 shell combo at lower hit zone value monsters. The breakpoint for this is at 20 or lower hit zone values. Admittedly, there are basically no monsters in the game that have hit zone values this low, but this is the combo you will end up using if you ever decide to run a defensive build. Now, we aren't the biggest fan of the image that Gunlance has, that it's a weapon you build only defensively on with quality of life skills and don't worry about DPS skills. While it is true that it scales lesser with EFR than other weapons do, it still gets a lot of DPS increase from running EFR. So let's just do some quick paper math on comparing a full EFR full damage wide set versus a defensive one. So this chart is going to compare a meta wide for Gunlance set versus a wide for Gunlance set running defensive skills, artillery 3 and capacity boost and no other EFR skills. For the poke 3 and shell 3 combos, the meta set's DPS gain is anywhere from 4% to 48.74%. For the shelling combo, it's anywhere from 1.35% to 24.01%, and when we compare the poke shell times 3 combo for the high EFR meta set versus the shelling combo for the defensive set, it's anywhere from 1.75 to 79.84%. While knowing the ranges is nice, let's look at a more realistic average sever hit zone value of around 60. That's at 46.55% more damage. That is a big difference. That's about the equivalent of using a rarity 4 weapon instead of rarity 7 or 8 weapon. Of course, this is mostly just napkin math. If this is a topic you'd like us to talk about more in the future, leave a comment below and we'll look into it more. But suffice to say, you do get a pretty sizable DPS increase from building damage. I did say in the previous video that Gunlance is better for defensive skills than other weapons, but that's more in context of niche useful skills like running wind resistance against Lunastra or tremor resistance against Uragan. Anyway, moving on. Wide Gunlance's ability to be able to have a bunch of different combos depending on the monster matchup makes it extremely flexible, and arguably the most Gunlancey of the Gunlances. If you're fighting something really squishy like Bagel, you can focus more on pokes than shelling. If you're fighting something with really tanky hit zone values like Luna or Lava, you can focus on shelling and only poke once per combo. On top of that, it is the safest playstyle by far because it has such little animation commitments. This makes it much easier to block or hop out of the way of anything that's going to beat on you. So what's the downside? The only wide 4 Gunlances that exist are KT weapons. And for those tanky matchups we talked about, you probably need a Mind's Eye deco so that one poke that you weave into your combo doesn't bounce. Outside of that though, this is pretty much the Gunlanciest of Gunlances. Next up we have Lance, otherwise known as Long Gunlance. It deals the most charged shelling damage by far, and you basically just spam charged shells. This does make it the only Gunlance style that deals purely shelling damage. And the focus skill does decrease the time it takes for your charged shells to go off, so focus 3 is mandatory. But honestly, even with that, it's a meme. As we mentioned earlier, shelling has very few damage modifiers. This means that long shelling, being purely shelling based for damage, caps out on this damage much more quickly than the other styles do. Wide and normal Gunlance can both stack more EFR to increase their damage. But that's not why you play long Gunlance. You play long Gunlance because you only need 3 skills, capacity boost, artillery, and focus to max your damage. Because you can't increase your damage any other way, you just end up stacking defensive skills, making for a very nice defensive build. The problem with this is that Wide Gunlance does that better. Wide Gunlance doesn't need focus to cap out its shelling damage, which gives you 3 level 2 slots of efficiency to fit in even more defensive skills. And on top of that, the shelling combo for wide Gunlance does more DPS than charge shelling does on long Gunlance for both the fixed damage per second and the true fire damage per second. And that's not even accounting for the one pokes damage in there, which increases the DPS even more. And yes, these combo times do account for reloads and for focus 3. And the combo time for long Gunlance is not even accounting for the ramp up, because your first shell cannot be a charge shell, you have to do a normal shell first. Which means even if you are spamming charged shells without any wind up using Rocksteady, you still deal less damage than wide Gunlance. And this is only on the shelling damage. Wide Gunlance also gets a poke in the combo. And it's less animation commitment, making it even safer. And you can fit more defensive skills on the build. I don't know why Capcom balanced the numbers this way, but long Gunlance literally does everything worse than wide does. It is less safe, it has worse builds, it deals less damage. The only real advantage is that your shells have slightly longer range, which doesn't even matter that much because the animation commitment is longer, locking you in place, so wide Gunlance can move around and reposition during that time. And even if you don't have a wide 4 Gunlance, wide 3 Gunlance only needs to deal 28 damage per poke to beat the DPS of long Gunlance. 28, that's not a lot. Capcom, why? The only situation I can see long Gunlance being better than wide Gunlance is if you need to do a shelling primary style, but you don't have a mind's eye deco, and the matchup you're fighting you might bounce if you use wide Gunlance pokes. Now, I'm not trying to shit on you if you like playing long Gunlance. If you find long Gunlance fun, great, it's a game, enjoy yourselves. One of my favorite meme builds to run is a sleep greatsword, and that sure as hell isn't max deeps. I just find it funny sometimes to TCS wake up a monster 3 times in a row to kill it. I'm just letting you know what the numbers look like. And the numbers look like that long Gunlance really needs a buff because it's literally a meme right now. But you know, memes can be fun. Finally, we have non-shelling Gunlance, the Swinglance. Swinglance is the least Gunlanciest of the Gunlances because you don't use shelling at all. Swinglance primarily focuses on the full burst combo minus the full burst part. Basically, you do an upswing into a slam, into a sweep, into a quick reload, into a slam, into a sweep, into a quick reload, etc, etc. So yeah, full burst combo without the full burst part. So why is Swinglance higher DPS than full burst most of the time? Well, 2 reasons, EFR scaling and sharpness. So the slam and swing in the combo have insanely high motion values. And because you don't need to fit in any shelling skills, you have insanely high EFR. You just build meta-hemoth sets much like you would for other AFR-based weapons. Between the higher EFR and the fact that you cut out animation time compared to the normal full burst combo, you end up dealing more DPS than any other Gunlance can against anything that has 55 or higher severed hit zone values, which quite frankly is most monsters in the game. But the bigger reason is because of sharpness. Swinglance gets to run Master's Touch, which means it has effectively infinite white sharpness. The problem with all shelling style Gunlances is that shelling cannot crit and therefore does not work with Master's Touch. Now Razor Sharp does work with shelling as well as Protective Polish, but no matter what, you have limited white sharpness on Gunlance shelling builds. The moment that Protective Polish runs out, you will run out of white sharpness very quickly on these builds because shelling shreds your sharpness. And once your sharpness drops to blue, you lose 10% of your EFR, which is a pretty noticeable damage drop, which makes non-shelling Swinglance even stronger. In fact, once the other styles hit blue sharpness, Swinglance basically has to hit anything with a 50 or higher hit zone value to always beat them, which again is basically every monster in the game. I won't bother going through all of different sharpness breakpoints, but the point is Swinglance does get better and better as the shelling Gunlances lose sharpness, which they inevitably will. Protective Polish lasts for a minute 30 if you have Item Prolonger 3, fun fact, and normal Gunlance will shred through its entire white sharpness in basically one combo. So Swinglance ends up being the highest DPS option over the entire course of a hunt out of all the 4 different playstyles. However, it also suffers from the same issue as normal in that it has an extremely long animation commitment and it's a ramp-up style combo. After you've gone through your first rotation, you can skip the upswing and just do a slam sweep quick reload loop. Because you skip the low motion value upswing, you do a lot more DPS this way. The problem is, unless you can flinch lock a monster or run Rocksteady, it's very difficult to keep chaining this without getting hit. Now you do also have higher damage pokes and whatnot because you have the highest EFR out of every build. And because of how high the DPS is on this combo, it's actually pretty easy to flinch lock a lot of matchups using this loop. But similar to normal Gunlance, this is a more dangerous playstyle. But because the animation time is almost a second and a half shorter because of the lack of full burst, it is quite a bit safer than normal is, while also being higher damage. It's very feast or famine. You're either doing insane damage per second and flinch locking a monster, or you're not getting hits off. So yeah, buyer beware. Alright, that about does it guys. This was a pretty long video, so let's go ahead and summarize all the points. In terms of DPS, normal full burst is the highest DPS you can get out of the shilling types in most matchups. But in those same matchups, around 50 to 55 hit zone value, Swinglance deals more damage than normal and has less animation time, so it's safer, and has more sharpness, so it's basically a better version of normal. But because of the long animation times and ramp up style combos, you pretty much either have to flinch lock a monster or you have to use Rocksteady Mantle and Health Augment to use these effectively. At those ranges of 50 hit zone value or lower, Wide does start being the highest DPS option, and Wide is significantly safer. Low animation commitments means that it can block or hop very easily to avoid monsters' attacks on reaction. This pretty much makes it the go-to style if you're playing against a monster that Swinglance has a bad matchup for. And long as a meme, Wide does literally everything it does better. Alright, that is everything guys. Thank you so much as always for watching the video. Sorry this video took so long to come out. I had emergency dental surgery this Monday, so I wasn't really able to work on it much, and Gunlance is really weird. Which is why this video took so much math and so much research to get done. Also, there will be a link in the description to an album containing all of the charts used in this video in case you want to see those more closely. If you learned something new or you have something to add to the discussion, be sure to leave a comment below. Thank you as always to Honey for making the tools we use to make sets, as well as for a lot of the numbers we use in this video. Also, a huge thank you to Zahn, Godhi, and Awenth, 3 of our set optimizers over on our Discord server. Gunlance math is really weird, and I appreciate all 3 of them for discussing all the different intricacies with me. Links to all of their various things in the description. Speaking of our Discord server, the Mathless Nest, be sure to check it out if you'd like to chat with me or any of the set optimizers, or just come chat in general about things. Be sure to check out our Twitter, we post updates, the videos, as well as various things that interest us. And be sure to check out Tuna on Twitch. He plays Monster Hunter World and a variety of other games. Also, if you'd like to help consider supporting the channel, be sure to check out our Patreon. And an especially big thank you to MC Persona, Foray, Exponage, Yoshi Cho, David Sternberg, XCLK07, Haika, Milky Powder, David Zhu Sinclair, John Cohen, Warren Kios, Hensatsuken, Wed Manticore, Lithaboli, Bram Orsel, Anti-Spartan, Chris Porth, Lightweight, Skylar Yang, Checkleman, Lupin, Mongus, Triple Agent, Alam Odom, Zimv, Billy Barthol, Magister Obscura, Jamie, and every single one of you who supports us on Patreon. Seriously, we cannot thank you guys enough. Especially when it comes to these kinds of videos that take so much data analysis and math to get out. No matter how much we pack it with all of this useful kind of information, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go viral. Especially when it comes to something more niche like Gunlance math. But thanks to you guys, we can continue to put out these kinds of high quality, informative videos, even though we won't necessarily be topping the YouTube algorithm charts anytime soon. So seriously, thank you guys so much. We do have that Gunlance meta video on the way for you guys, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like to know as soon as that comes out. Now that we've fully explored how shelling works, different styles, and how they compare to each other, we can finally get to the actual meta builds. Gunlance is super weird, guys. Anyway, that's it for this video, guys. Happy hunting, hunters. Bye!